Hey y'all, it's Stephen at Kampen-Lewis on September 12th. It is fairly early in the morning right now. Sun's just coming up over there, shining in my face, and I just wanted to talk to you a little bit today about preparing for fall for Catasetums. I'm getting a lot of questions from different people saying, hey, my Catasetums are dropping their leaves or are growing a new growth, or I'm new to Catasetums, what should I expect for the fall season? So that's what I want to talk a little bit about today. I'm going to show you, basically, I'll turn the camera around and show you a quick tour of where my collection is at. It hasn't changed much since I made the last video. Basically, most of my leaves are green, but there's a lot of spikes coming in right now. Fall is sort of, or late summer, early fall is really when most of the Catasetums are kind of, and their allies are ramping up their bloom season, although, you know, different species and their hybrids will bloom at different times of the year. Large plants will also bloom throughout the growing season. But this time of year is typically the best time of year for Catasetum growers. So as the sun is coming out from behind the cloud, let me turn the camera around. I'll take you on a real brief tour, and then we'll grab some plants and go check them out on the table. So for those of you in more southern areas where there's still plenty of summertime left here in mid-September, at least in terms of air temperature and warmth, your Catasetum plants might look similar to this, where it's just a bunch of green leaves and maybe a few of the lower ones, the lower leaves are falling off. And then, you know, there's probably a good chance that even in the south here, y'all are getting a lot of bloom spikes. Here's Catasetum Fong Sing, most likely with a bunch of girls. And here's actually that Cycnices cooperi that I was chatting about with William Green about a week ago. I said that was probably going to be a female flower. It turns out I jumped the gun. This is what a bunch of male flowers will look like. I don't know if there we go. So now you can see all these male buds are stacked up against each other, and that's what I spoke about in the discussion of how they kind of stack up on top of each other, like sort of red solo cups, I guess, stacked on each other. And I thought it was a female flower because it didn't have that. It turns out the buds were just so immature that they were not showing that they're actually a bunch of males, which is great. I'm excited. And I'm going to take this guy over to the table here and talk about him in a sec to talk about some of these lines and what happens during late summer when your plants are thinking about going dormant. Here is some buds that are being ravaged by a bug that I can't seem to find. This is a common theme this year for some reason. I don't normally have this many flowers being decimated by what I think are katydids. I think our weird weather is really doing a number on, well, increasing bug populations right now. So this might be what's happening. So you see some of these lower leaves start to drop off, and that's one of the first signs of dormancy, or at least the plant is at least thinking about going dormant. Here's another spike, and there were two blooms that got munched on by bugs and got taken off. This is another spike that was literally overnight was chopped in half by a bug. I don't normally have this kind of problem. I think our snowmageddon in February altered the insect population, and then our weird, cool, wet summer has also had an effect on the insect populations, and they just seem to have exploded. But essentially, for those of you in the south, this is what your collection is probably looking most like. A bunch of spikes and not a whole lot of leaf drop. So let's grab some of these and sit down at the table. So I just described what your Catasetums probably look like for those folks in the southern United States. But if you're farther north than I am, which there's a good chance it's a lot of you, either in the United States, Canada, Europe, or wherever, the changing day lengths, and the days getting shorter, nights getting longer, and the cooler nights are probably influencing your catasetums a lot more than they are here in Texas. So your plants are probably at a more advanced stage of dormancy. So let's kind of talk about some of those telltale signs that your plants are starting to go dormant. So first of all, the Cycnices cooperi is a really good example of these lines that show up here on the new leaves turning. In an actively growing plant, there'll be a sort of a white interspersed with light green, and then that light green part will start to get darker as the plant decides to go dormant or is thinking about it. The white lines will actually turn yellow, and you can really see that on the Cycnices pretty well. So these lines are no longer white, they're turning yellow. The light green is now dark green. And of course, the bloom spike is another indication that this one is late into the growing season. Another indicator that your plant is starting to go dormant, of course, will be leaf drop. And that typically happens from the bottom of the plant and then works its way up. So the last leaves to drop on this guy will be these top ones, and the first one will be down here. So on your Catasetums or your Cycnices, this lowest one can drop even during the middle of summer. So that's maybe not the greatest indicator, but it is an indicator of oncoming dormancy. And it really it kicks into earnest once you have these other leaves slowly dropping. And then, maybe around the end of November here, a lot of my plants will only have these top 4 or 5 leaves left. So what else should you be thinking about in terms of culture as your plants are slowly starting to go dormant? The first thing is that you don't need fertilizer anymore. There's no reason to use fertilizer since your plants probably aren't really adding on a whole lot of size at this point. And if they are, continue to fertilize. But if they're at sort of their maximum size, which a lot of them will be, you probably don't need any fertilizer. So that's the first thing that you can change. So for me, I have slow release fertilizer, which I add to these baskets. Most of my baskets are fairly empty by now. Some still have fertilizer, so I just won't refill them as the nutrients sort of filter out into the plant media. Another thing that you'll start thinking about is less water. So my plants are nowhere near the less water stage. I probably won't start withholding water until sometime in November, mid to late November for me here in Central Texas. Although some of you folks in the far northern areas have probably already seen enough leaf drop where you might consider less water, not no water yet, but less water. Now, if your plants have dropped all their leaves, I would continue to water occasionally, maybe once a week or once every other week, just so that your plant has enough nutrient stores to get it through the winter. Most likely, if your plant is already dormant, it should wake up early, which is helpful. However, sometimes they just stay dormant for a long time, and so they really need a lot of nutrients throughout that dormancy to wake up and be able to start having the nutrient stores to start putting out new growths and new roots. Also, something that you want to think about is that you don't want to repot your plants. Let's say you're getting your plants from a grower, and the plant is at an advanced stage of its growth cycle and is maybe going dormant. You don't want to repot quite yet. The best time to do that is when the plant is dormant and then just starting to wake up. So you'll see the new little nubbins coming out in the spring. And that can be, for some species, that can be as early as December or January. But for a lot of them, it'll be, February, late February, March, and even April. And then it's that time that you want to repot. You really don't want to mess with the roots if you can help it. So that's why you want to repot before the new roots come out. And then that plant can have a whole growing season to put out new roots. Since every yearly flush of new roots is vital to that plant's health. You really, really don't want to mess with those roots during the growing season. So what do you do if you are like the 3 plants that I have next to me right here, and they're starting to grow? It is middle September, and I am draining out the water so that I don't dump it all over the cat who is just off screen here. And you can see that this guy, this is a little Catasetum shunkii, has started to put out a new growth. What do you do then? Or, if you're like this primary hybrid between sanguinian and tabulari, and you've got a fairly advanced new growth. Same thing with this Catasetum tabulari variety rhinophorus, which also is actively growing. So having those extra nutrients and extra water at this sort of late stage of the game can cause some overachievers to say, hey, I'm not going dormant yet. I'm going to keep growing. And there's 2 ways you can handle it. So for a small plant like this, I'm going to encourage that new growth. I'm going to keep watering. I'm going to keep fertilizing until it finishes up, which hopefully will be near the end of December. You know, having a late dormancy will cause your next year's set of growths to start a little later as well, and that's frustrating. The other thing that you can do is water and fertilize as normal, so you can carry that growth for a while and then just give it a hard rest so that that second growth is stunted. And I have found that a lot of those second growths will be stunted anyway, so maybe it's not really worth it, and your plants will be fine. They'll shut off growth when they realize that there's no water or nutrient. So what I'm going to do is actually grow these new growths out through November, and then make a judgment call whether or not I want them to go just dry and sort of abort what growth is left and that the plant would normally do, or to continue watering. Most likely I'll cut off water and by the end of November. So hopefully this helps get you where you need to be in terms of your fall growing, and I will talk to you guys later. Let me know if you have questions. See ya.